David's enthusiasm was quite hard to walk away from, to be honest. I mean, anybody who's met David know he comes like a whirlwind and a tornado enthusiasm. So that, combined with reading the script and the fact that it was a musical, was quite appealing. The look and the aesthetic of the film is based on David's sort of early thoughts that he didn't want something particularly fantastical, although it has an element of fantasy in what we're doing and the technology. He wanted it to be grounded in some sort of Victorian era drama, and two of his favourite films, including Mary Poppins, would be Willy Wonka and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which both have that sort of Victorian gritty feel, but with a sort of fantastical edge to it. To design the Cobbleton look, we were really relying on the look of the location that we found that would then be built in the stage to match that. So we had a long scouting period looking for the right town, the right village around the UK, of which there are many choices. And eventually we sort of chose Norwich, which I'd visited before. We looked at lots of other places, and we felt that was a really good balance for something that had a real sort of almost fantastical look in itself, even though it was real. And then we could expand that and bring that sort of architecture to the stage. But basically, David wanted it to be grounded in a sort of Victorian reality. There were sort of two distinct periods, sort of 20, 30 years apart, from the young Geronicus to the bulk of the film in the sort of the later, well, I suppose it's later Victorian period, and Geronicus being more in his sort of 50s. And initially we were looking at different periods for that gap. Did we start early 1800s and go to middle 1850s, or did we start at 1850 and go to the early 1900s, or did we go as far as 1920, 1930 for the second period? And a lot of that sort of developed from the sort of technology that was around at those periods. So we could establish a different technology to the second period. Like there would be gas lights in the early views, and those lights would become early electric lights. And that was right through the whole, whether it was vehicles, horse vehicles, cars, carriages. We wanted to try and establish a very visual point to the audience that the times had changed between the two. In terms of what the production design looked like, it was basically coming from David. I think David is the creative force of the film, and all those areas we talked about what he wanted it to be, the references to Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Willy Wonka and Mary Poppins, and that sort of slightly fantastical Victorian England, but with a base of reality. That's what we were sort of aiming for right through the show visually. Well, the toys and the inventions and the gadgets are a big part of Geronicus's world from the early period, the 1860s, when he's a very supposedly successful toy maker of his time, and is then coming across the fantastical element of an invention that could change his life, but then that gets stolen away from him, and the bulk of the story is based around that. So again, with the time period, we had to work out what sort of technology, what gadgets would look right in the 1860 period and believable, and toys, and what would then translate to being slightly more sophisticated in the later part. Although in the later part of the film, we only really see the one gadget, a Buddy 3000. We don't really see what Gustafsson is actually making in the factory. So it was more to do with the toys and gadgets we see in the beginning of the film in the shop when it's in all its glory. The dance scenes, as you may have seen, they're pretty big and expansive on the show with 50, 60, 70 dancers. And like the stunt world, they all want things to do, whether they're swinging around lampposts or doing a backflip over a wall, that you have to sort of take on board all those things. And also the geography of the set, and that was quite a hard balance to get because you were still designing, say, the shop set as something that visually worked for you on camera. Geographically, the movement in there for normal acting and moving worked. But then when you add Ashley, who was great, Ashley Wallen, with his choreography, and we set up a mock-up set for him to rehearse on, then obviously he had requirements about the furnishings, the dressing, where they go, what couldn't go where the stairs could be. So you're trying to get this balance where it works for him and his team, but also doesn't change the look or the idea of the shop too much. The change from talking to singing and dancing is a really critical piece in any musical, and the coming out of it at the end where you change back to normal. And it's really interesting to see how Ashley and David worked on that. That it doesn't look like one's one thing and one's the other. It needs to be almost subliminal merge from one world to the other without the audience jumping. We have 2 or 3 major key set or environments to do. There's the shop and the Cobbleton area of streets and the interior of the shop and his workshop. There's the country town where Jessica lives in a thatched cottage, in an idyllic, away from everything sort of world. And then there's Gustafsson's factory, which is his interpretation of basically Jeronicus's world from the 1860s. He's stolen the book of ideas and he's built his factory based on that. David always thought of Jeronicus as a bit of a mom and pop shop. Obviously, it was quite successful in the 1860s, but it was still just one shop in the town. And so when you jump to see the factory, over those 30 years, Gustafsson has really become very successful with the help of Don Juan. But at the point in the script, obviously, that we get to, he's sort of run out of ideas, and that's part of the sort of story arc that we get to at the sort of the end of the film. David's sort of favourite reference points were always Willy Wonka and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. So we've used sort of spiritual references for those in the film. We haven't used what they used as such in there, but ideas of design and the way design's done and the way it's shown with the textures, we were just trying to sort of bring that spirit to David's world. David has been continually trying to get my name up on a shop, on a road name, which keeps going up and I keep painting it over. But I know one day he'll take that shot. It's funny. I mean, it's quite nice to have it, but I just don't think Bocquet really reads like a road name. But it's in there. So, but I keep aging it down so nobody could see it too much. There's a certain sort of joyfulness that comes from it, and maybe that's the music, maybe that's the more sort of African American type of music that's coming into it rather than the sort of jolly English vaudeville type music, and that certainly gives it a bit of a spirit, and the dancing is very much in that way. But I think if it works, I think it'll be like every other Christmas film. It'll be a mixture of emotions that at the end of the day just gives you a good feeling. When you're on set and the singing and the dancing is happening, is quite exhilarating. It's because it's there in front of you. People are doing it. It's not something that's added in post. I mean, I know the sound, but the songs are still being sung. And you can see that even at the end of a Friday when everybody's really tired after a long week, if you're finishing that week with an uplifting musical number, everybody really lives with that and really sort of, wow, this is really exciting. So if that translates to the film, then you've probably got, you've got a good chance of it being pretty good. It was obvious here with the dancing that you're not going to be wanting to do 50 people dancing against a green screen and then continue with a moving camera continually putting in the backgrounds.